Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, which I'll explain to you guys what that is a little bit later. We're going to start with meditation, and then afterwards, we're going to do our Pali Canon and English study group. The individual who we refer to as the Buddha figured out how to get to enlightenment. Over 2,500 years ago, he was able to train his mind to get to the point where it was completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer experience any discontent feelings. You will have eliminated all the causes and conditions that produce things like anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings. So meditation is an important part of this, but you need more than just meditation. So we start each one of our classes with meditation, but then I help you guys to be able to understand the other teachings that it takes to be able to move the mind to enlightenment. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I start with some chanting to be able to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. You can see these chants on a laminated sheet over there. You're even welcome to chant along if you like. It's on the cabinet. I'm going to be chanting these as we ease into meditation. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. So he used it as a learning tool, as a learning device. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. Today, we use it as a way to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. If you look at the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants himself, because he wouldn't have gone around and said, here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me. This would be ego or arrogance. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you no longer put yourself above people and look down on people. So I'm sure the Buddha wouldn't have created these chants for himself. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, and frustration and all these other discontent feelings to the peaceful, joyful mental state that is enlightenment, and this teacher didn't want anything or expect anything from you, they were just helping you out of the kindness of their heart, you might actually have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's why I think these actually came from his students, either during his life or after his death. So after the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance. I'll be guiding you in a breathing mindfulness meditation session, essentially teaching you and instructing you how to meditate while we're meditating. But then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating together. Everybody here at the temple and everybody joining online will just all be meditating at the same time. Now, during this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a car go by, a dog barking, a bird chirping. Someone here might cough or sneeze. This is all normal. If you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you will cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated. But if you understand that the world around you is constantly changing, that it's impermanent, and that these sounds are going to arise, they're going to change, and they're going to fade away, then you can be at ease and you can rest peacefully during meditation, understanding the world is functioning exactly the way it's intended to function, which is with impermanence. So there's going to be sounds as you're meditating. Then after we're going through that period of time of quietness, we're going to come out of meditation with some more chanting, and then that's where I'll help you guys to understand the Pali Canon and English study group and what we do each Saturday morning. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would learn these different positions at different times. It's kind of like having a tool belt, and you would invoke these tools anytime you need them based on various things that might be going on with your body or your mind. Oftentimes, students are learning in the seated position, so I'll give you guys some guidance on the seated position, which will help you to be able to find something that's maybe even more comfortable than the way you're currently sitting. But make sure you think about the things that I'm going to share with you as recommendations or suggestions, because there isn't just one fixed way to actually sit in meditation. That would be permanence. Instead, we live in an impermanent world, and different people are going to find different things to be comfortable. So you could be sitting on the floor or in a chair. Maybe if you're at home, you're on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can sit however you like. If you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of help soften your seat a bit. And if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you might just choose to do that lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, this can impede the circulation in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up, or you might just rest your hands comfortably in your lap. So you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. The same thing's true for anybody who's in a chair or a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed. So this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of the upper body, it's helpful if this is erect. With the sternum up and the shoulders back, it'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, because meditation is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you are real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be erect with the sternum up and the shoulders back, because not only will it keep the mind attentive and alert, but it'll make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting to ease into the meditation. You guys are welcome to join in, and then I'll come back in with the guidance to help you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sankho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Good morning. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone who's joining online as well. As I was sharing, today is our Pali Canon and English study group, which is a way to actually learn the teachings of the Buddha, getting your mind to the point where you've trained it to experience complete peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. This is what the enlightened mental state is, where you no longer experience any discontent feelings. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that can be eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. And meditation is an important part of that, but you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to this enlightened mental state. So you need more than just meditation. So in these classes, I start with meditation, but then afterwards, I usually will share some teachings about what the Buddha taught in order to be able to help you understand the teachings that you need to be able to make your way to enlightenment. The way that the teachings of the Buddha work is that you learn, examine, and investigate his teachings. You reflect on them to verify if they're true or they're false, and then you practice his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life and training your mind. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing a bunch of things and hoping something good happens when you die. He also didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer. If you see those kinds of things associated with the teachings of the Buddha, that's not what he actually taught. Instead, he taught you these teachings to understand the world around you and how to train your mind to eliminate the causes and conditions that are causing the mind to experience things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So we have many programs here to help you to gradually journey closer and closer to this enlightened mental state. And there's various foundational programs that students will typically start in. On Sundays and Wednesdays is our group learning program. That's a great time for somebody who's just starting out to be able to gradually learn the path to enlightenment. And then next week, I'm actually going to be teaching a foundation in the path to enlightenment course, Monday through Friday. It's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is giving you all the foundational teachings that you need to be able to really get on the path to enlightenment. In fact, today at 1 p.m., I'm going to be teaching an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. It's a 3-hour course from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's helping you to be able to understand the teachings of the Buddha from an introductory standpoint. So you can start in any of those different ways. And we have various programs that you can see on our bulletin board over there and on our website as well. On Saturdays, we come together to be able to help students to be able to understand the more deeper teachings of the Buddha using his original words. And all these other programs, I use this first book of our book series. I have a 13-book series. I use this first book and all the other foundational programs. And this is where somebody would really start. And you can get this for free by downloading it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for our printing cost so that way we can purchase more books for other people, or you can get it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. That's where everybody would be wise to start. But obviously, many of you guys maybe have never been here before, you haven't studied here before, so you didn't necessarily know that there's these foundational programs. You'll learn plenty today, but what we do today is a bit different than we do in all of our other programs. In all of our other programs, I will teach for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then I will open up for questions. I will teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. It's more of a traditional style of learning. Where this program on Saturdays, it's more of a study group where I invite students to be able to explore volumes 2 through 13 of our book series. Today, we're actually in volume 3, chapters starting with 91. This is volume 3 of our book series. It's titled Foundation in the Teachings. All of these other books, volumes 2 through 13, they use the original words of the Buddha to be able to help you see what did he actually teach. So what we do is I actually invite students here at the temple and anybody who's joining online through Zoom to be able to read one of these chapters. You can see here, this is chapter 91. I'm going to have a student read this, and then afterwards, I'm going to share some teachings on that, and then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you guys might have related to this particular teaching. This is the original words of the Buddha. So if there's someone here at the temple or someone on Zoom that would like to volunteer to read, all you need to do is raise your hand. Here at the temple, we have microphones in the white bowls. Just get a microphone, bring it back to your seat, press the gray button. You'll see the lights come on, and you can hold this up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you're welcome to keep these with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone with them. And then if you're not using it, if you could turn the microphone off, that would be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then if there's anybody online who would like to volunteer to read this, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand in Zoom, unmute your microphone, and then we'll be able to hear you throughout the live stream. And same thing when you get to questions. If you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your questions in the comment section and I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask your question that way. So is there anybody here or in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Okay, Pam. Looks like Chris just volunteered online too. So, okay, go ahead, Chris.
Sure. I think you might need to share the screen as well, David.
Oh, sure. Thank you. There you go.
Why every practitioner should study the Tathagata's words which should be studied, learned, and investigated in the foremost assembly. Here, in this kind of assembly, when those discourses are being recited that are mere poetry composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, the monks do not want to listen to them, do not lend an ear to them, or apply their minds to understand them. They do not think those teachings should be studied and learned. But when those discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being, there we go. That was just some words were being blocked there. But when those discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being recited that are deep in meaning, world transcending, connected with emptiness, the monks want to listen to them, lend an ear to them, and apply their minds to understand them. They think those teachings should be studied and learned. And having learned those teachings, they question each other about them and investigate them thoroughly, asking, how is this? What is the meaning of this? They disclose to others what is obscure and clarify what is unclear, and dispel their confusion about numerous misunderstandings. This is called the assembly trained in investigation, not in conceited talk.
Chris, this chapter goes on, but I'm going to pause you right there for a second so that we can talk about this one. I'm going to pause you a couple times, okay? Thank you for reading that, sir. Okay, so this first one here, what the Buddha is talking about is, you might think that during the lifetime of the Buddha that he was the only one teaching, but there was actually other people who were teaching too. It wasn't just him. Because if you lived during the lifetime of a Buddha, you'd probably be interested in learning from that person. But not everybody understood that he was an actual Buddha. A Buddha doesn't go around performing a bunch of miracles to convince people that they're an actual Buddha. Their teachings are independently verifiable, so people can actually learn and investigate his teachings and see that they're actually true through learning, reflecting, and practicing his teachings, and they can see the condition of their mind and their life actually improving. It's actually better for a Buddha if people don't actually know that they're necessarily a Buddha, because one of the powers and strengths of a Buddha is that they can actually observe the quality of a student's mind, and then they can provide them teachings to be able to help them to be able to understand how to purify their mind of these pollutions that the Buddha discovered, and then be able to help them to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So if everybody knew who the Buddha was, then he wouldn't really have this ability to be able to observe the natural state of someone's mind and then offer them teachings to be able to help them. So he didn't go around trying to convince people that he was an actual Buddha. So there were other people who were teaching besides him. It wasn't just him that was teaching. And these other people who were teaching, they might have been claiming that they knew how to get to enlightenment, but they actually didn't necessarily know how to get to enlightenment, and their teachings didn't lead to enlightenment. So the people that were studying with the Buddha, they knew that their condition of their mind in their life was gradually improving because they could see the truth for themselves that this is actually occurring. Where these other people, they might have been learning with teachers about different teachings, but it wasn't what was going to lead to enlightenment. It might have been just kind of easy on the ears. The Buddha refers to it as mere poetry. And you might see that today. You might listen to a podcast or go to a YouTube video or something like this, where somebody's just kind of talking about all this poetry and talking about waves rolling over your body and all these other things, where the teachings of the Buddha are actually very deep and very meaningful. And he's actually explaining to you the natural laws. It's not just about poetry and all these kinds of things. So what the Buddha is saying here is that these teachers that are sharing these mere poetry, his students who understand the path to enlightenment and what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment, they're not interested in listening to that type of talk because they know it doesn't actually lead to enlightenment. But instead, what his students are doing is they're penetrating deeply into the teachings that it takes to be able to understand how to train the mind and actually get to enlightenment. They're investigating and examining the teachings. And it's his teachings that are going to actually lead to the mental state of enlightenment. So here, his monks, his students, aren't interested in studying those other teachings, but instead they're interested in studying his teachings and investigation. And he's saying that when you're investigating the teachings and you're asking questions, that this is to expose what is really the teachings and how to actually independently verify them and train your mind through these teachings. Whereas if you're just sitting around and talking mere poetry and it's easy on the ears and just kind of this high and flighty language, this is the conceit of the mind that maybe is producing that type of speech and thinking that somehow you're leading people to enlightenment. So it's an assembly or a community trained in investigation, where you're investigating and examining the teachings, not in conceited talk, that is actually going to lead to enlightenment. So I'm going to go through a lot of these and then I'll open up for questions at the end. So Chris, if you'd like to pick up on this one, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. So the second one, words that should be studied and mastered. Simile of the drum peg. Monks. Once in the past, the Dasarahas had a kettle drum called the summoner. When the summoner became cracked, the Dasarahas inserted another peg. Eventually, the time came when the summoner's original drumbeat had disappeared and only a collection of pegs remained. So too monks. The same thing will happen with the monks in the future. When the discourses spoken by the Tathagata that are deep, deep in meaning, world transcending, dealing with emptiness are being recited, they will not be eager to listen to them, nor lend an ear to them, nor apply their minds to understand them. And they will not think of those teachings should be studied and mastered. But when those discourses that are mere poetry composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, are being recited, they will be eager to listen to them, will lend an ear to them, will apply their minds to understand them, and they will think those teachings should be studied and mastered. In this way, monks, those discourses spoken by the Tathagata that are deep, deep in meaning, world transcending, dealing with emptiness, will disappear. Therefore, monks, you should train yourself thus. When those discourses spoken by the Tathagata that are deep, deep in meaning, world transcending, dealing with emptiness are being recited, we will be eager to listen to them. We'll lend an ear to them, we'll apply our minds to understand them, and we will think those teachings should be studied and mastered. Thus, you should train yourselves.
Okay, let me talk about this one, Chris. So the drum that he's talking about here is a wooden drum. If you have a drum that's made out of wood and it starts to crack, an individual might put a wooden peg into that drum, and they kind of put a wooden peg kind of to insert and fill the crack. Well, if you do this enough with all the cracks in the drum, eventually the original wood of the drum is no longer there. What you've got is a bunch of pegs, right? So that's what the Buddha is saying is slowly going to happen to his teachings. He's taught 2,500 years ago. He died in 483 BCE. So his teachings were very strong, very vibrant, and shining in the world at that time. But then slowly but surely over time, due to impermanence, people changed his teachings, or people started teaching other things. And now, 2,500 years later, we're at this point that the Buddha is talking about here, where people aren't necessarily interested in listening to his teachings. You've got ordained practitioners who don't even study his original teachings. But that's not what's going to lead to enlightenment. You need to be able to study his original teachings to be able to see what actually leads to enlightenment. So just like this drum, if you put enough pegs in it, it's eventually no longer the same original drum. The same thing is true if you insert a bunch of things into the teachings of the Buddha that aren't his teachings. It becomes very difficult for people to see what his teachings are and what his teachings are not. That's why even if you go to a temple today and you see rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayers and things like this, the Buddha never taught any of those things. But when you show up to a temple and you see a person dressed in a certain color of clothing and shaving their hair and sitting in the front of the room, you might actually think that that's the original teachings of the Buddha, and you might do those same kinds of things. But instead, what you're looking at is you're looking at a wooden peg. You're not looking at the original drum. So the Buddha is saying that slowly but surely there's going to be this period of time where people aren't interested in listening to his teachings because they're so deep. It's very challenging for some people to be able to understand his teachings. But that's why a teacher is here to guide you through that so that you can then approach them and be able to gradually understand the teachings and gradually experience the improvement. So that's why the Buddha here is encouraging his students to train with his teachings, that they slowly but surely learn and train themselves through his original teachings. And this is what would be advisable for you too. 2,500 years later, you can still access his original teachings through this book series and all the resources that we share as part of this community where you can study his original teachings. So now, Chris, you can read all of these one by one, and then we'll just kind of sum it up at the end.
Sure. So words from singleness of mind. Agivasana. The Tathagata teaches the teachings to others only to give them knowledge. When the talk is finished, agivasana, then I study my mind internally, quiet it, bring it to singleness, and concentrate it on that same sign of concentration as before, in which I constantly reside. Words that are just so, not otherwise. Mind he fully awakened monks, until the night he attains final nibbana, final enlightenment. In this interval, whatever he speaks, talks of, and expounds, all that is just so, not otherwise. Words of immediately effective teachings. Good monks, so you have been guided by me with these teachings, which are visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading, to be experienced by the wise for themselves. Words of the teachings and discipline, words to be resided with as one's own island, as one's own refuge. Ananda, it may be that you will think, the teacher's instructions has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It should not be seen like this, Ananda. For what I have taught and explained to you as teachings and discipline will, at my passing, be your teacher. These monks, Ananda, either now or after I am gone, who reside with themselves as their own island, with themselves as their own refuge, with no other refuge, who reside with the teachings as their island, with the teachings as their refuge, with no other refuge. It is these monks, Ananda, will be for me greatest of those dedicated to the training. Words to be undertook as taught, not to be abolished. As long as the monks do not give instruction on anything that has not been taught, or abolish anything that has already been taught, but undertake and practice the training guidelines as they have been taught, growth is to be predicted for them, not decline.
Okay, thank you, sir. So just going through these here, what the Buddha is talking about here is that when he teaches, he brings his mind to singleness and concentration before, during, and after. He doesn't say it here, but he says it in other parts of his teachings, where here he's just kind of focusing on after he gives a talk, his mind is concentrated, it's focused, right? So this is the way that an enlightened being functions, is that their mind is always focused, they have concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Their mind's not scattered and jumping all over the place. You wouldn't find the Buddha teaching in ways where he's jumping around from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and very difficult to be able to understand. Instead, he's going to be very focused and concentrated in the way that he's delivering discourses to be able to help students to understand the teachings. Words that are just so, not otherwise. This was actually spoken by one of his students after he died. One of his students said this. He said, from the night that he fully awakened until the night that he attains final nibbana, which is death, essentially, for an enlightened being, in this interval, whatever he speaks, talks of, and expounds, all that is so, not otherwise. What they're saying here is everything that he talked about from the time that he got to enlightenment until the time that he died was to be able to help others to be able to get to enlightenment. That's what a Buddha does, is they figure out how to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, helping countless people get to enlightenment. And then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So everything that this individual talked about from the time that he got to enlightenment until the time that he died was helping other people out of compassion and loving kindness to be able to get to enlightenment. Because if you understand how transformative the enlightened mental state is, you would be interested in seeing other people get access to that. So for example, if you discovered the cure to cancer, you might be interested in seeing other people get access to it. And you might even give it away for free so that as many people as possible can get the cure to cancer. Well, what the Buddha did is he figured out this path of how to get to this point where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And then he gave it away for free to everybody to be able to understand how to get to that same mental state. And he spent his time to be able to help people do that from the time that he got to enlightenment until the time that he died. When you learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha, the true teachings of the Buddha, they're immediately effective. For example, if you learn that loving kindness will eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will, as well as the lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance, even the slightest dislike towards other beings. This is one of the teachings of the Buddha. What loving kindness is where you have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. where you have an active goodwill towards others without judgment. Well, if you learn this teaching and you apply it in your day-to-day life, that whenever you see anger coming up in your mind, you bring in the loving kindness where you have a genuine interest in seeing beings be well, this is immediately effective. You're going to see that it knocks out your anger, right? So each one of the teachings of the Buddha are immediately effective, and you can see that they're actually working to improve the condition of your mind in your life. So that's why he encourages people to inspect his teachings, to be able to examine them, not to believe them. He never taught anybody to believe his teachings, but instead to inspect his teaching. Because the more you examine and investigate his teachings, you'll be able to apply them in your day-to-day life, and they're immediately effective. If you start doing meditation and all the other teachings that the Buddha teaches to be able to train your mind, you'll see that it's effective to your mind. Then here, this is a teaching that he was sharing as he was getting close to death, is that he was explaining to his students to reside with themselves as their own island or their own refuge. What a refuge is protection. What the teachings of the Buddha do is by the time you train your mind's fully protected, that you no longer experience anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings by the time you fully train your mind. You're going to need teachers and guides to help you along the path. You're not going to be able to get to enlightenment without the help of a teacher or a guide. You'll see that in other parts of the teachings. But what the Buddha is teaching you here is don't just follow other people. If you just conform to society and what society's doing, you'll never actually get to enlightenment. So there's other people out there that are maybe using drugs and alcohol, or they're sleeping around with lots of different people, or they're stealing or lying or things like this. If you just conform to what society is doing, you're just going to stay in the darkness with all of those people, and you'll keep experiencing the same difficulties and struggles that those people experience as well. But if you reside with yourself as your own island, meaning your wisdom that you've cultivated on this path, if you use that to be your guide in life, now you can understand what's wise and unwise, and your mind can be protected because you can make wise decisions of what would be wise to do in this world or not to do. That's what the Buddha is helping you to do when we talk about awakening to enlightenment. He's helping you to cultivate wisdom about the world around you and these natural laws of existence. The main natural law that he's helping you to be able to understand is called the natural law of Gama. Some people call this karma. This isn't anything mystical or magical. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There's no being that's overseeing this. What the natural law of Gama is cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. This is a Pali word. Some people know it as karma, but in the original teachings of the Buddha, in the Pali language, the word Gama is being used. And this is what you're cultivating wisdom about, to be able to see the cause and effect relationship through decisions that you make on a daily basis and what is the result that you're experiencing. So as you cultivate more and more wisdom about the world and you're making wiser and wiser decisions, you can get to a point more and more where your mind's getting to this peaceful and joyful mental state, and your life is getting there as well. But other people aren't going to necessarily be doing those things. And if you just conform to what the rest of society is doing, you'll continue to experience those same difficulties and struggles. So the Buddha is explaining to you, hey, reside as your own island, your own protection. Don't rely on other people to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. Instead, cultivate your own wisdom so that you know the truth of what would be wise or unwise to do in this world. And then lastly, what he's doing here is he's guiding individuals to not give instruction on anything that has not been taught, and not to abolish anything that has already been taught, right? Because one of the things that people tend to do is they tend to either overtly or inadvertently start changing teachings. When you start changing the teachings of a Buddha, they will no longer lead to enlightenment. So if somebody is giving instructions on anything that has not been taught, this is something like, say you go to a temple and people tell you, don't point your feet at the statues in the front, or don't lay down in the temple and meditate on a laying position. Sometimes you'll hear this from people. You won't hear it from me, but you might hear it from other people. The Buddha never taught these kinds of things. But if people propagated this kind of instruction and this kind of teaching, then people wouldn't really know the true teachings of what it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. So if we teach things that the Buddha did not teach, then it's not going to actually lead to enlightenment. And that's why he's guiding people to not abolish things that he taught and to not actually teach things that he didn't teach, because sometimes people abolish things that he's actually already taught. So if somebody's going to get to enlightenment, they're going to need to get closer and closer to the original teachings of what the Buddha taught without these modifications and changes that you see implemented throughout different parts of the world. So all of these chapters together, all of these discourses together are helping you to be able to understand why it's important to study the original words of the Buddha. All too often, people in the world aren't actually studying his original teachings. This can kind of sound kind of strange that if you're considering yourself to be Buddhist, wouldn't you study the original words of the Buddha? Especially for people who maybe are coming from a Christian environment where there's just one book like the Bible. But in the teachings of the Buddha, there's 45 volumes of books. They're about this thick. So the average person doesn't actually study the original words of the Buddha. But here in this book series, what we've done is we've consolidated it and made it available to people for free so that you can get access to it. And then you can see what did the Buddha actually teach and what he didn't teach. And slowly but surely, you can train your mind through those teachings. So this is a chapter to be able to help you see through the words of the Buddha why it's important to study his original words. And all of these things together help you to be able to see that. And you'd be wise to base your learning and growth and development on the path to enlightenment in his original teachings where you have reliable translations. And that's what I'm sharing here in this particular book series. So do you guys have any questions on any of these things here? I know there's a lot of discourses here, but is there anything you guys would like to ask questions about? No questions here. Let me see if we have anything online here. Okay, I don't see any questions online either. Okay, these chapters aren't typically this long. Thank you, Chris, for reading that. I really appreciate that. What you've got is you've got the original words of the Buddha. You've got references here that take you back to each individual source so you can see where this came from. And then you've got words from me to be able to help you understand how to integrate this into your life and experience the improvement and the benefits that the Buddha is talking about in his teachings. So that's what I've shared there. So this is chapter 92. It looks like Pam would like to read this one. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay. The Noble Eightfold Path is the wholesome practice instituted. Ananda, I instituted that wholesome practice which leads to complete liberation, to freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, experience, to enlightenment, to nibbana. And what is that wholesome practice? It is this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Ananda, I say to you, continue this wholesome practice instituted by me, and do not be the last man. Ananda, when there are two men living, he under whom there occurs a breach of this wholesome practice, he is the last man among them. Therefore, Ananda, I say to you, continue this wholesome practice instituted by me, and do not be the last man.
All right. Thank you, Pam. So with that last chapter, the chapter is helping you to be able to understand it's important to study the original words of the Buddha. It's important to base your practice in the teachings of the Buddha. Well, the next question is, well, what are the teachings of the Buddha? Like, what should I start studying? Well, it's the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha. Everything else that he taught plugs into this. So that's what he's saying here, is he's saying this is the path to enlightenment. It's the Eightfold Path. Study that path. That's what's actually going to lead to your enlightenment. He's talking to Ananda here, which is one of his close students. We think that this individual was either his brother-in-law or his cousin or something like that. And he's the one who remembered a lot of the teachings and helped to document the teachings shortly after the death of the Buddha. So you'll see his name showing up in the discourses a lot because he was the one who recounted the teachings of the Buddha. And he was with the Buddha for pretty much his entire teaching career. From the age of 35 to 80, the Buddha was teaching for 45 years. Ananda was pretty much by his side throughout that entire time. So we see a lot of the discourses involve Ananda. So he's talking about, okay, this wholesome practice, what are the teachings that the Buddha taught that leads to this liberation, this freedom from strong feelings, to elimination, to peace, to direct knowledge, which is your experience to be able to see the truth, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Nibbana is the Pali way to say the word enlightenment. Well, it's the Eightfold Path. That's what leads to enlightenment. That is the path to enlightenment. And then ultimately he gets to this point where he says, okay, practice this wholesome practice. Don't be the last man. If you can imagine if the entire world got to enlightenment and you were the last person to get to enlightenment, boy, that would be kind of like going to a buffet and you're like the last person to eat and there's like one little morsel of food left. Well, it's still great that you got to enlightenment, but you lived all those years and all those lifetimes being angry and frustrated and agitated and annoyed, and you're the last one to get to enlightenment. So the Buddha is encouraging you, don't be the last one. Apply dedication, determination, and diligence towards enlightenment. Because what the unenlightened mind has to a high degree is complacency. In the unenlightened state as a human being, you'll be very complacent. You will be disinterested in some cases of doing the work and applying the effort to be able to make your way to enlightenment. There's all kinds of complacency in the mind. You're going to need to arise effort and energy towards your growth and development as a human being. That's what the path to enlightenment is to grow and develop into a better and better human being. And the mind, unfortunately, tends to have a lot of complacency in the unenlightened state, where you'll be unwilling to apply the effort and energy that's needed to be able to train your mind and actually get to this enlightened mental state. So you'll see different times in the teachings of the Buddha where he's encouraging people to make effort and energy towards learning and growing and developing on this path, because getting to enlightenment would be the very best thing that could ever happen for you in your entire life. But if you're complacent, you're never going to actually be able to experience that. So this is that wholesome practice. This is the path to enlightenment. It's called the Eightfold Path. And I'm actually going to be teaching this on Tuesday morning here at the temple. And you can learn here at the temple, or you can learn online through our live stream, or you can watch the recordings. I teach this particular practice many times. In fact, this afternoon from 1 to 4, after I introduce students to the teachings of the Buddha, I'm going to be sharing his very first teaching, which is called Right View. It's the very first step on the Eightfold Path. So if you guys are interested in that, it's going to start at 1 o'clock today. And then there's the course next week that you can attend as well. So any questions on this here? No questions? Okay. I don't see any online either. Okay, let's study one more chapter, and then maybe we'll call it a day. This particular book now is getting into a section where it's starting to talk about the death of the Buddha and helping you to see some of his last teachings that he actually shared as he was getting closer and closer to death. So is there anybody who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Chris. Go ahead, sir.
The Buddha's last days. Sariputta, there are certain ascetics and Brahmins whose doctrine and view is this. As long as this good man is still young, a black-haired young man endowed with youthfulness in the prime of his life, so long is he perfect in his clear wisdom. And when this good man is old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, and come to the last stage, being 80, 90, or 100 years old, then the clarity of his wisdom is lost. It should not be regarded so. I am now old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, and come to the last stage. My years have turned 80. Suppose that I had 4 disciples with 100 years lifespan, perfect in mindfulness, recall of the teachings, memory, and clarity of wisdom. Just as a skilled archer, trained, practiced, and tested, could easily shoot a light arrow across the shadow of a palm tree. Suppose that they were even to that extent perfect in mindfulness, recall of the teachings, memory, and clarity of wisdom. Suppose that they continuously asked me about the four foundations of mindfulness, and that I answered them when asked, and that they remembered each answer of mine and never asked a subsidiary question or paused except to eat, drink, consume food, taste, urinate, defecate, and rest in order to remove sleepiness and tiredness. Still, the Tathagata's explanation of the teachings, his explanation of factors of the teachings, and his replies to the questions would not yet come to an end. But meanwhile, those four disciples of mine, with their 100 years lifespan, would have died at the end of those 100 years. Sariputta, even if you have to carry me about on a bed, still there will be no change in the clarity of the Tathagata's wisdom. Rightly speaking, were it to be said to anyone, a being not subject to ignorance/delusion has appeared in the world for the welfare and peacefulness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the good, welfare, and peacefulness of gods and humans. Of me, indeed, that rightly speaking, this should be said. The Venerable Ananda approached the perfectly enlightened one. Having approached and paid homage, respect, while massaging the perfectly enlightened one's limbs, he said to him, "It is wonderful, Venerable Sir. It is amazing, Venerable Sir. The perfectly enlightened one's complexion is no longer pure and bright. His limbs are all flimsy and wrinkled. His body is stooped, and some alteration is seen in his sense bases, in the eye sense base, the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, and the body sense base. So it is, Ananda. In youth, one is subject to aging. In health, one is subject to sickness. While alive, one is subject to death. The complexion is no longer pure and bright. The limbs are all flimsy and wrinkled. The body is stooped, and some alteration is seen in the sense bases. In the eye sense base, the ear sense base, the nose sense base, the tongue sense base, and the body sense base. This is what the perfectly enlightened one said. Having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this: "Look on you, pitiful aging, aging which makes beauty fade. So much has the charming puppet been crushed beneath advancing age. One who might live 100 years also has death as destination. Death spares none along the way, but comes crushing everything. And now, Ananda, the Tathagata has today at Chapala's shrine consciously and deliberately rejected the rest of his allotted term in life. And when he has thus spoken, the Venerable Ananda addressed the fortunate one and said, 'Grant us the privilege, Venerable Sir, to remain during the eon, live on through the eon, O fortunate one, for the good and peacefulness of the great multitudes, many people, out of pity for the world, for the wholesome and the gain and the well-being of gods and men.' And now, Ananda, beg not the Tathagata, was the reply. The time for making such a request has passed. Again, the second time and the third time, the Venerable Ananda begged the fortunate one in the same words, and he received from the fortunate one the same reply. In that, when a suggestion so evident and a hint so clear were thus given to you by the Tathagata, you would be incapable of comprehending them. If you should have then so begged the Tathagata might have rejected the appeal even to the second time, but the third time he would have granted it. You, therefore, O Ananda, are the fault. You are the offense. Now, Ananda, have I not formerly declared to you that it is now is in the very nature of all things, near and dear to us, that we must divide ourselves from them, leave them, sever ourselves from them, How then, Ananda, can this be possible? Whereas anything, whatever born, brought into being, and organized, contains within itself the inherent necessity of dissolution. How then can this be possible that such a being should not be dissolved? No condition can exist. All conditioned things must grow old. Work out your salvation with diligence. The final extinction of the Tathagata will take place before long. At the end of 3 months from this time, the Tathagata will die. My age is now ripe. My life draws to a close. I leave you, I depart, relying on myself alone. Be diligent then, O brethren, holy, full of thought. Be steadfast in dedication. Keep watch over your own hearts, who becomes tired not, but holds fast in this truth and natural law. Cross the sea of life, shall make an end of grief.
All right. Thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is actually preparing to die. It's about 3 months before his actual death. This is how enlightened he was, that he knew he was going to be dying 3 months in advance. And he gave his students a heads up that he would actually be dying. This was wise of him because there would have been many, countless people who were learning and developing their practice. And if they had any last minute questions, they'd be able to get those answered. They'd have 3 months to be able to understand that, hey, he's only going to be around for another 3 months. And now he's going to die. Just like every single being, he's going to need to die. We're all impermanent. Every single one of us are going to experience death. This first part here, he's helping you to be able to understand that even though he's close to death, his mind is still sharp. Because oftentimes people associate old age with the declining of mental capability, but this isn't actually true for someone who's actually trained their mind. For someone who hasn't trained their mind, yeah, their mind will slowly deteriorate as they get older and older and older. But if you've trained your mind, particularly if you're enlightened, your mind's not going to deteriorate as you get older and older. Sure, you won't be able to see as well, hear as well, smell as well, taste as well. Certain things that contact the body, you won't necessarily have the same level of sensitivity, but your mind will still be sharp. It'll still be crisp. The Buddha says, even if you were to carry me about on a bed, that his wisdom would still be profound, right? He'd still be able to have the clarity to teach, right? So even though his body is not functioning so well as he gets older, his mind is still functioning very, very well. And you can see that through this particular teaching. He talks about how he's actually teaching people out of compassion for the world, right? Because that's why a Buddha would end up teaching, because they don't want anything or expect anything from their students. They're just there to help them to be able to understand the path to enlightenment and how to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state. Then he goes on further, and this individual, Ananda, who was with him for a very long time, is essentially begging and pleading with him not to actually die. I actually think that Ananda was attached to the Buddha because he never got to enlightenment during the lifetime of the Buddha. It wasn't until about 6 months after the Buddha died that he actually got to enlightenment. And the Buddha predicted that he would get to enlightenment during that lifetime, but it wasn't during the Buddha's lifetime. It was after the Buddha died that Ananda finally got to enlightenment because he was most likely attached to the Buddha. And one of the ways that people eliminate an attachment to someone who's close to you is they actually die. You can actually eliminate an attachment to someone who's close to you without them dying, but sometimes people don't actually do that, or they're not capable of doing that, or they don't understand the wisdom of how to do that. So it is possible to eliminate an attachment to someone before they die, but it looks like Ananda was attached to the Buddha, and he ultimately didn't eliminate that until after the Buddha died. So he was begging and pleading with the Buddha not to actually die. And then ultimately the Buddha says, okay, I'm going to die here, and I'm going to be dying in 3 months. And as I grow old, we all are going to grow old. We're all going to get to this point where we die. But instead, be sure that you stay steadfast with dedication. Again, encouraging to eliminate complacency, because that's really a strong thing in the mind. And this is oftentimes hindering someone from making their way to enlightenment. So a Buddha is going to remind people to not actually be complacent. When he says keep watch over your hearts, he tends to refer to the mind as the heart. You'll see this occasionally, that he refers to it this way, that he talks about the mind, yes, but he also sometimes mentions it as the heart. Here in Thailand, they think about the mind residing inside the heart. So usually when Westerners, when we talk about the mind, we will tend to point to the head, but for Thai people, they will tend to touch the heart, because in Buddhist teachings, the Buddha talks about the heart and the mind sometimes interchangeably as being the same. So here again, he's just saying, don't allow yourself to be complacent. Continue to work towards developing this truth and this understanding of the natural laws. And this is what's going to lead to the end of grief, sorrow, and sadness in the mind. That's the path to enlightenment. So if you learn and train to be able to independently verify his teachings, you'll see that as you're training your mind, it's leading to this improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. So do you guys have any questions on this discourse here? Another pretty long one for today. For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn and understand the teachings of the Buddha. As I mentioned, there's other opportunities for you guys to learn. You can see our bulletin board. You can see our website. You can come and talk to me and I'll help you to be able to understand how to get plugged into these resources, to be able to help you slowly train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Perhaps we'll see you next time. Take care. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.